We all agree that you're no longer part of the family, my son wrote. Don't come to any meetings. Even his wife Christina liked this message. I replied, thanks for agreeing. I'll cancel all automatic payments. At midnight, the group chat was filled with panic. There were 87 missed calls. Where are you watching from today? Write your location in the comments below. Like and subscribe. Because on this channel, we don't just tell stories, we listen to each other. Each of you has a story waiting to be told in your heart. Maybe your story will be a balm for someone else's wound. If you have a story you've been keeping inside, you can send it to the email address in the description section. Because sometimes the first step to healing is just telling it. Let's go back to the beginning, because every strong ending deserves a fitting origin story. Let me tell you how I got to this moment. Sitting in my quiet living room at 2 a.m., watching my phone buzz with the desperation of people who finally realized they'd bitten the hand that fed them. And trust me, I'd been feeding them very, very well. It started 3 weeks earlier at my grandson Brandon's graduation party. I'd spent $2,600 on catering because my son Robert insisted we needed something special for his boy. Never mind that Brandon hadn't called me in 7 months, or that his mother, Christina, had been giving me the silent treatment since I'd refused to guarantee their home equity loan. I showed up anyway, because that's what grandmothers do. Right? Wrong. Apparently that's what ATMs do. I arrived early to help set up, wearing the coral dress Christina had specifically requested because it photographed well for Instagram. The backyard looked stunning. String lights draped between the oak trees, tables covered in burgundy and gold linens. Robert was manning the grill, while Christina orchestrated everything like a battlefield commander. "Mom, you made it," Robert said, barely glancing up from the burgers. "Can you take care of the beverage station? Christina has a whole setup planned." Of course she did. Christina always had systems, especially when they involved me doing the grunt work while she collected the compliments. I spent 25 minutes arranging drinks according to her color-coded diagram, wondering when exactly I'd become the unpaid staff at my own grandson's celebration. The guests started arriving around noon. Family, friends, Brandon's classmates, neighbors. I watched from my assigned post as people congratulated Christina on the gorgeous party. She smiled graciously, accepting praise without once mentioning who'd actually funded it all. That should have been my wake-up call. Brandon opened his presents on the back deck, surrounded by his friends. I'd given him a $500 Amazon gift card, figuring a college-bound kid could use it for textbooks and supplies. When he unwrapped it, he glanced briefly and said, "Oh, nice, thanks, Grandma Maggie." Then he set it aside for the next gift. No hug, no real acknowledgement, just the bare minimum courtesy you'd show a stranger. I stood there, refilling ice buckets, pretending it didn't hurt. When had my grandson stopped caring about me? When had I become just another checkbox on his obligation list? The answer came during Christina's speech. She stood on the deck steps, wine glass raised, her voice carrying across the yard. "I just want to thank everyone for being here today to celebrate Brandon's achievement. Rob and I are so incredibly proud of the young man he's become. And we're grateful for all the support our family has provided him. Our family, not his grandmother, not the woman who'd paid for his SAT prep courses, his sports equipment, his graduation party. Our family." But it was what happened next that really opened my eyes. Christina continued, listing everyone who'd contributed to Brandon's success. She thanked his teachers, his coaches, his friends' parents who'd carpooled. She thanked Robert's business partner for being understanding about schedule changes. She even thanked the neighbors for tolerating his drum practice phase. She never mentioned me, not once. I stood there watching the woman whose mortgage I'd been quietly covering for 3 years give an emotional speech about family support, and I realized something that probably should have occurred to me years ago. I wasn't family to them. I was a service provider. The party continued around me, but I'd stopped participating. I watched Christina embrace Brandon, watched Robert beam with pride, watched relatives congratulate them for raising such a fine young man, Nobody looked my direction. Nobody seemed to notice I existed. As the afternoon stretched on, I found myself calculating the catering bill, the deposit for Brandon's dorm furniture, the monthly transfers to Robert and Christina's account that they thought I didn't know they knew about, the car insurance on Brandon's Civic, the credit card payments I'd quietly handled when Robert's landscaping business hit rough patches. By my estimation, I'd invested approximately $52,000 in Brandon's life over the past 4 years alone. Apparently, that bought me the privilege of standing by the beverage station, invisible and unacknowledged. The breaking point came when I overheard Christina talking to her sister near the dessert buffet. "Thank God Brandon got into state," Christina was saying. "The tuition is so much more manageable than those private colleges. And with Rob's income stabilizing, we should be able to handle it without too much pressure." Her sister nodded sympathetically. "College is ridiculously expensive now. How are you managing everything?" Christina lowered her voice. "Well, between you and me, Rob's mother helps out occasionally. Nothing significant, but every bit helps." Nothing significant. 3 years of mortgage payments, thousands in emergency loans, Brandon's entire graduation party. Nothing significant. I set down the pitcher I was holding and walked quietly to my car. Nobody noticed me leave. Why would they? The ATM had served its purpose for the day. That night, I sat in my kitchen with my laptop open, staring at my bank's auto-pay screen. Mortgage payment to Robert and Christina, $2,675 monthly. Car payment for Brandon's Civic, $412 monthly. Family cell phone plan, $265 monthly. Various credit card minimums for Robert's business expenses, $940 monthly. For 3 years, I'd been quietly covering $4,292 every single month in expenses for a family that apparently didn't consider me part of their inner circle. That's $154,512 total. Over $150,000. That's when my phone buzzed with the group chat message that changed everything. Robert had created a family group chat a year ago, supposedly to keep everyone connected. Christina, Brandon, Robert's brother James, James's wife Linda, and me. It was mostly used for sharing photos and planning holidays. But this message was different. Robert: "Hey everyone. Christina and I have been discussing some things, and we think it's time for healthier boundaries. Mom, we've decided you're no longer part of our immediate family circle. We need space to develop as a nuclear family without external interference. Please respect our decision and don't attend future family events." I stared at the message, reading it 3 times to ensure I understood correctly. Then I watched as Christina liked it. James liked it. Linda liked it. Even Brandon, my grandson, who I'd supported through 18 years of life, liked the message. That's when I typed my response. "Thanks for confirming. I'll cancel all the auto payments." And then I did exactly that. Mortgage payment, canceled. Car payment, canceled. Cell phone plan, canceled. Credit card auto pays, canceled. All of it. Every automatic transfer that had been quietly flowing from my account to theirs for years. By midnight, my phone had 52 missed calls and 81 text messages. The group chat had exploded with panic. Suddenly, everyone wanted to talk to the woman they just excluded from the family. But I was done talking. I turned off my phone and went to bed, sleeping better than I had in years. Tomorrow would bring consequences. But tonight, for the first time in decades, I felt like I mattered again, even if it was only to myself. The pounding on my front door started at 7:18 a.m. I know the exact time because I was sitting at my kitchen table, sipping coffee and watching the sunrise through my window when the noise shattered the peaceful morning. Through the peephole, I could see Robert's face, flushed and panicked. Behind him stood Christina, arms crossed, looking ready for battle. I considered not answering, but curiosity won. After all, 12 hours ago, I apparently wasn't family. Now here they were, on my doorstep at dawn. Mom, what the hell have you done? Robert's voice cracked as I opened the door. I stepped back to let them in, noting how Christina pushed past without greeting me. They were both still in yesterday's clothes, looking like they hadn't slept. Good. Maybe they'd spent the night learning what real stress felt like. I did exactly what you asked, I said calmly. You wanted boundaries. You got them. Christina whirled around, her usually perfect hair disheveled. You can't just cancel everything. Do you realize what you've done? I poured myself another cup of coffee, deliberately not offering them any. Let them stew in their panic while I enjoyed my morning ritual. I've respected your wishes, I said. You stated I'm not family, so I stopped acting like family. Robert slumped into my kitchen chair, uninvited. Mom, you don't understand. The mortgage payment is due tomorrow. If it doesn't clear, then I suppose you'll need to make other arrangements, I interrupted, like actual adults do. The silence that followed was exquisite. For years, I'd watched them take my financial support for granted, never once acknowledging the sacrifices I'd made to keep their lives comfortable. Now they were getting a taste of reality, and it was bitter medicine. Christina found her voice first. Maggie, this is absurd. We had a family disagreement, but that doesn't mean you should destroy our financial security. Oh, I think you're confused, I said, settling back into my chair. I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply no longer participating in your financial security. There's a difference. The look that passed between Robert and Christina spoke volumes. They'd been counting on my money without ever actually discussing it, assuming my support was unconditional and eternal. Well, conditions had definitely changed. Look, Robert said, running his hands through his hair. Maybe we were harsh yesterday. We were stressed about Brandon leaving for college, anxious about the empty nest thing. We didn't mean to hurt you. Actually, you did, I replied. You meant every word. You just didn't expect consequences. Christina tried a different tactic, her voice dripping with artificial concern. Maggie, we're family. Family works through problems together. We don't abandon each other over misunderstandings. I almost laughed. The woman who'd liked a message excluding me from the family was now lecturing me about abandonment. The irony was thick enough to cut. You're absolutely right, Christina. Family doesn't abandon each other. So tell me, when exactly did you start considering me family again? Was it when you realized your mortgage payment was canceled, or when Brandon's car payment bounced? Robert's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and went pale. The bank's calling. They're asking about the missed payment. Better answer it, I suggested. Wouldn't want to damage your credit score. As Robert stepped outside to take the call, Christina moved closer to me. Her mask of sweetness finally slipped, revealing the calculating woman underneath. You can't do this to us, Maggie. We have responsibilities. Brandon's tuition deposit is due next week. The mortgage, the car payments, the credit cards. You know we can't handle all of this alone. Then perhaps you should have thought about that before excluding me from your family circle, I said. Fascinating how quickly circumstances change your perspective, isn't it? She leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper. What do you want? Money? An apology? What will it take to fix this? And there it was, the question that revealed everything about their relationship with me. In Christina's mind, I was a problem to be solved, a situation to be managed. She genuinely couldn't grasp that this wasn't about negotiation. It was about dignity. I want you to leave, I said simply. Robert came back inside, his face ashen. They're threatening foreclosure proceedings if we miss another payment. Mom, please, we need your help. No, you need my money. There's a difference. I stood and walked to my front door, opening it meaningfully. I think we're finished here. You have your boundaries and I have mine. Christina's composure finally shattered completely. This is insane. You're destroying your own family over hurt feelings. I'm not destroying anything, I said. I'm just no longer rebuilding what you tear down every day. They left, but not before Christina turned back with one final threat. You'll regret this, Maggie. When Brandon needs help with college, when Rob's business struggles, when we lose the house because of your selfishness, you'll regret it. I closed the door and locked it. Regret. The only thing I regretted was waiting so long to find my backbone. My phone rang within minutes. Brandon's name flashed on the screen. Grandma Maggie. His voice was small, uncertain. For the first time in months. He sounded like the little boy who used to spend weekends at my house helping me bake cookies. Dad says you're not helping with my car payment anymore. That's correct, sweetheart. But I don't have a job yet. How am I supposed to make the payments? It was a fair question, and part of me ached hearing the confusion in his voice. But Brandon was 18 now, legally an adult, and yesterday he'd liked a message that cut me out of his life. I suppose you'll need to find employment, I said gently. Most college students work part-time to cover their expenses. This is because of that stupid group chat thing, isn't it? Grandma, I didn't really mean anything by it. I was just, I don't know, going along with everyone else. And there was the truth that hurt most of all. He hadn't excluded me because he was angry or hurt. He'd done it because it was easier than standing up to his parents, because I didn't matter enough to defend. Brandon, I love you. I always will. But loving someone doesn't mean enabling them to treat you poorly. So you're punishing me because my parents are being idiots? The question caught me off guard. Maybe Brandon understood more than I'd given him credit for. I'm not punishing anyone, I said. I'm teaching all of you that actions have consequences, that people, even grandmothers, have limits. After I hung up, I made myself a sandwich and sat down with a legal pad. If I was going to rebuild my life without being anyone's ATM, I needed a plan. First, I called my financial advisor, Patricia Chen. We'd worked together for 16 years. And she'd been diplomatically questioning my family's financial dependence for at least 6 of those years. Maggie, she said warmly, I noticed some unusual account activity yesterday. Is everything all right? Everything's perfect, Patricia. I need to schedule a meeting to discuss redirecting some of my automatic payments permanently. There was a pause. The family support payments? All of them. Another pause. Then something that sounded suspiciously like relief in her voice. How about tomorrow morning? I think we have quite a bit to discuss. That evening, my phone rang every 15 minutes. Robert, Christina, Brandon, even James and Linda calling to mediate a situation. I let them all go to voicemail. At 10 p.m., a new message appeared in the family group chat. Robert, Mom, please call me back. We can work this out. I know we hurt you, but we're family. Family forgives. Family forgives, but family also respects. Family also appreciates. Family also considers each other's feelings before making unilateral decisions about who belongs and who doesn't. I typed back one final message. Family is a two-way street. You'll understand what that means when you're ready. Then I left the group chat entirely. For the first time in 3 years, I fell asleep without worrying about someone else's bills. It was a beautiful feeling. But something told me this was just the beginning of a much larger reckoning. Patricia Chen's office overlooked the downtown skyline from the 24th floor, all glass and steel with enough diplomas on the wall to fill a small library. I'd always felt slightly intimidated by the corporate setting, but this morning I walked in like I owned the place. Funny how cutting toxic people out of your life can improve your posture. Maggie, you look different, Patricia said, gesturing to the leather chair across from her mahogany desk. Lighter somehow. $4,292 every month to be exact. I replied, settling in with my purse and the folder I'd prepared. And yes, I feel wonderful. Patricia pulled up my accounts on her computer, her expression growing more pleased with each screen. I have to say, Maggie, I've been hoping for this conversation for years. Your family's financial dependence has been deeply concerning. Tell me exactly how concerning. She turned her monitor so I could see the numbers. In the past 5 years, you've transferred approximately $314,000 to various family members. Your retirement savings growth has been completely stunted by constant withdrawals. At your current age, you should be accumulating wealth, not depleting it. All this is true to heal the eyes of people with self-injury and blockage intent interference. I stared at the figure. $314,000. Over $300,000 I'd given to people who just told me I wasn't family. What would my net worth be if I hadn't made those transfers? Patricia clicked through several screens, running calculations. Conservatively, you'd have about $920,000 more in your retirement accounts. With proper investment growth, potentially over $1 million. $1 million. I'd essentially given away $1 million retirement to fund my family's lifestyle, and they'd repaid me by cutting me out of their lives. Patricia, I want to make some changes, significant ones. Over the next hour, we restructured my entire financial life. The mortgage payment money would now go into a high-yield savings account. The car payment money would fund a new travel fund. The family cell phone money would cover my own increased insurance and healthcare costs. But the credit card autopays presented an interesting opportunity. These business expenses Robert's been charging, Patricia said, reviewing the statements. Are you aware that some of these look questionable? I leaned forward. What do you mean? Robert had been living large on my dime while telling everyone I helped out sometimes. Patricia, I want you to have our attorney send a formal accounting request. I want to know exactly what Robert's been charging to those credit cards for the past 3 years. Are you considering legal action? I'm considering all my options. We spent another hour setting up new investment strategies, updating beneficiaries on my accounts, and discussing my long-term financial goals. For the first time in years, those goals didn't include supporting ungrateful adult children. As I was leaving, Patricia handed me a business card. Maggie, I'd like you to meet someone. Catherine Hartwell. She's a personal coach who specializes in helping women reclaim their power after difficult family situations. I think you two would connect well. I walked out of that building feeling transformed. The afternoon sun seemed brighter, the air cleaner. I had plans now, goals that didn't revolve around other people's needs. My phone buzzed with a text from Christina. Christina. Maggie, Brandon's car was repossessed this morning. He's devastated. How could you do this to your own grandson? I stared at the message, waiting for the guilt to hit. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Brandon's car being repossessed meant he'd face real consequences for his choices. Maybe it would teach him something his parents clearly hadn't. I texted back, actions have consequences. Brandon will learn to make better choices. Her response was immediate. You're a horrible grandmother. I almost replied with a list of everything I'd done for Brandon over the years, but stopped myself. I didn't owe Christina explanations anymore. I didn't owe any of them anything. Instead, I drove to Catherine Hartwell's office for an impromptu consultation. Catherine was about my age, with silver hair and laugh lines that suggested she'd figured out how to enjoy life. Her office was warm and inviting, filled with plants and comfortable furniture that made you want to sink in and share secrets. Patricia, called ahead, Catherine said, offering me tea. She said you're going through a family restructuring. That's one way to put it. I prefer getting my life back. For the next hour, I told Catherine everything. The years of silent support, the graduation party humiliation, the group chat exclusion, and my nuclear response. She listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Maggie, let me ask you something, she said when I finished. In all those years of supporting your family financially, did they ever express gratitude? Did they ever acknowledge what you were sacrificing for them? I thought about it carefully. No, never directly. It was always treated like it was just what I was supposed to do. And when did you start believing that was your role? The question hit me like a physical blow. When had I started believing that my value as a mother and grandmother was measured by my willingness to solve everyone's financial problems? I think after my husband died, I said slowly. Robert was struggling with his landscaping startup. Christina was pregnant with Brandon. They needed help and I had life insurance money. It felt good to be needed. Being needed and being used are two different things. We talked for another 30 minutes about boundaries, self-worth, and the difference between helping and enabling. Catherine gave me homework. Write down every financial sacrifice I'd made for my family over the past 5 years. And beside each one, note whether anyone had thanked me. As I drove home, my phone rang constantly. Robert, Christina, Brandon, James, Linda, even some cousins I hadn't heard from in months. Word was spreading through the family grapevine that the Bank of Maggie had closed. I let them all go to voicemail. That evening, I started my homework assignment. The list was longer than I'd expected, and the thank you column remained stubbornly empty. Page after page of financial support, and not a single expression of genuine gratitude. But the exercise revealed something else, a pattern of escalating demands. It had started with small emergency loans and evolved into automatic monthly payments. They'd been conditioning me, gradually increasing their dependence until I was essentially funding their entire lifestyle. And I'd let it happen because being needed felt better than being alone. At 8:30 p.m., Robert showed up at my door again. This time he was alone, and he looked terrible. Exhausted, stressed, maybe even a little humbled. "Mom, can we talk? Really talk?" I let him in, but I didn't offer coffee or try to make him comfortable. Those days were over. "Robert, before you say anything, I want you to know that I've had my attorney pull all the credit card statements. I know about the Scottsdale resort. I know about the golf club memberships. I know about the expensive dinners you've been charging to my account." His face went white. "Mom, I can explain. No explanations necessary. I understand perfectly. You've been living a lifestyle you can't afford on my money, and you've been lying about it." He slumped onto my sofa, looking like a man whose world was collapsing. Good. Maybe it needed to collapse. "What do you want from me?" he asked quietly. "I want you to grow up. I want you to take responsibility for your choices. And I want you to stop treating me like an ATM with gray hair. And if I do that, if I change, if I make things right, will you help us again?" I looked at my son, this middle-aged man who still wanted mommy to solve his problems, and I felt a strange mixture of love and disappointment. "Robert, that's exactly the wrong question. You're still thinking about what you can get from me instead of what you can give back to this relationship." He sat there for a long moment, processing. Then, surprisingly, his shoulders began to shake. My successful grown son started crying right there on my couch. "I don't know how to fix this, Mom. I don't know how to pay the mortgage or keep Brandon in school or save my marriage. I've been depending on your money for so long I forgot how to handle things myself." It was the first honest thing he'd said to me in years. But honesty, I was learning, doesn't automatically earn forgiveness. It just makes the conversation more productive. "Then you'd better start remembering," I said gently, "because I'm done being your safety net." After he left, I sat in my quiet house and realized something important. I wasn't angry anymore. I was disappointed, and I was determined. But I wasn't angry. I was just done being taken for granted. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Brandon stood on my doorstep, looking younger than his 18 years, holding a folded piece of paper. "Grandma Maggie, can I come in?" I studied my grandson's face. He looked tired, stressed, and genuinely remorseful. Part of me wanted to hug him and fix everything immediately. The other part reminded me that he'd like that message just as enthusiastically as the adults. "Come in, Brandon. We should talk." He settled nervously on my sofa, still clutching the paper. "I wrote you a letter," he said, offering it to me. "I've been thinking about everything that happened, and I wanted to explain myself." I unfolded the handwritten letter, noting that Brandon had taken care with his penmanship. The words were carefully chosen, clearly thought out. "Dear Grandma Maggie, I want to apologize for liking that message in the group chat. I know it hurt you, and I'm sorry. I was being a coward, going along with what my parents wanted instead of thinking for myself. I've been thinking about all the things you've done for me over the years. The money for my car, sure, but also the other stuff. When I was little, you were the only one who remembered I liked mint chocolate chip ice cream better than vanilla. You came to my soccer games, even when it was pouring rain. You helped me with my science projects when my parents were too busy. I know you loved me. I felt loved. But somewhere along the way, I started taking that for granted. I stopped saying thank you. I stopped appreciating you. Mom and Dad keep saying this is all about money, but I think it's about respect. And I haven't been respectful. I'm sorry for that. I don't expect you to fix my car situation or help with college. I got a job at the campus bookstore, and I'm applying for more financial aid. I want to figure things out for myself. But I hope someday you'll forgive me, because I miss my grandma, the real one, not the one who just wrote checks. Love, Brandon. I folded the letter carefully, surprised by the tears threatening my eyes. This was the first genuine apology I'd received from anyone in my family. Brandon, this is beautiful. Thank you for taking the time to write it. Do you forgive me? I looked at my grandson, this young man who was finally taking responsibility for his choices. I forgive you, but forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was. He nodded seriously. I understand. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry and that I'm going to do better. We talked for another hour. Brandon told me about his new job, his plans for college, and his growing awareness of how his parents had been manipulating the family dynamics. He was more mature than I'd given him credit for, just buried under years of enabling. Grandma, can I ask you something? Of course. Are you happier now, since you stopped helping everyone financially? The question surprised me with its insight. Yes, Brandon, I am happier. I'm discovering who I am when I'm not just solving other people's problems. Good. You deserve to be happy. After Brandon left, I called Diane Williams, my old high school friend who'd recently moved back to the area. We made plans to drive to the coast the following weekend just for fun. When was the last time I'd done something just for fun? That afternoon, Catherine Hartwell called to check in. Maggie, how are you handling the family pressure? Better than I expected. I had a breakthrough with my grandson today. That's wonderful. What about the others? I thought about Robert's desperate visits, Christina's angry texts, the constant voicemail messages. They're still in crisis mode, still thinking this is temporary. What makes you think it isn't temporary? The question caught me off guard. Was this temporary? Was I planning to eventually resume my role as family ATM? Catherine, I think I've been waiting for them to prove they've changed, but maybe that's the wrong approach. What would be the right approach? Maybe I need to prove to myself that I've changed, that I'm not the same woman who let herself be taken for granted for years. That evening, I did something I'd been avoiding for weeks. I sat down and wrote my own letter, not to my family, but to myself. A promise about the woman I wanted to become. Dear Maggie, you are not responsible for everyone else's financial security. You are not required to sacrifice your comfort for other people's convenience. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to expect gratitude. You are allowed to be appreciated for who you are, not what you can provide. Your worth is not measured by your willingness to solve problems or write checks. Your value comes from your kindness, your wisdom, your decades of experience, and your capacity for love. You have raised your children. You have been a good wife, mother, and grandmother. You have paid your dues. The rest of your life belongs to you. Don't forget this again. Love yourself. I folded the letter and put it in my jewelry box next to my mother's pearl earrings and my wedding ring. A reminder of who I was becoming. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. And in my dreams, I was sailing on a beautiful boat with new friends, while my phone sat silent on the dock. The next morning would bring new challenges, but I was ready for them. I was finally ready to live my own life. The letter arrived on a Wednesday morning, mixed in with my usual bills and grocery store flyers. The return address made my stomach clench. Morrison and Hayes, attorneys at law. My first thought was that Robert had hired a lawyer to somehow force me to resume the family payments. But as I opened the envelope with trembling fingers, I realized the truth was much worse. The letter was from Christina's attorney, informing me that I was being sued for elder financial abuse against my own family. According to the complaint, I had manipulated the family's financial dependents to exercise undue influence over their decisions. By suddenly withdrawing support, I had allegedly caused severe emotional and financial distress that constituted a form of abuse. The audacity took my breath away. They were actually trying to make me the villain in this story. I called Catherine immediately. She listened grimly as I read the legal language aloud. "Maggie, this is obviously frivolous, but it's also concerning. It sounds like they're trying to establish a legal foundation for claiming you're mentally incompetent." "What do you mean?" "If they can convince a court that your financial decisions are erratic or harmful, they might try to get conservatorship over your assets. It's a common tactic families use on elderly relatives." My blood ran cold. They weren't just trying to get my money back, they were trying to take control of all of it. "Catherine, what do I do?" "First, don't panic. Second, call Patricia Chen immediately. Third, get yourself the best attorney money can buy. If they want to play legal games, let's make sure you win." I spent the rest of the day assembling my defense team. Patricia recommended a family law attorney named Sarah Morrison, who specialized in elder financial abuse cases. Sarah was sharp, experienced, and immediately grasped the situation. "Mrs. Foster, your daughter-in-law has made a serious miscalculation," Sarah said during our emergency meeting. "Not only is this lawsuit baseless, it's actually backfired. By filing these claims, she's created a legal record of her family's financial dependence on you. That's going to be very useful for our countersuit." "Countersuit?" Sarah smiled grimly. "Oh yes, we're going to sue them for financial exploitation of an elderly person. 3 years of mortgage payments, credit card abuses, manipulation. We have a very strong case." Over the next week, we built our defense systematically. Patricia provided detailed financial records showing the pattern of family dependence. Catherine documented the emotional manipulation. Sarah gathered evidence of Robert's business expense abuses. But the most damaging evidence came from an unexpected source. Brandon called me on Thursday evening, his voice shaky with anger. "Grandma Maggie, I need to tell you something about the lawsuit." "Brandon, you don't have to get involved in this." "Yes, I do, because I know something they don't think I know." He told me about a conversation he'd overheard between his parents and Christina's lawyer. They'd been coaching him on what to say if called as a witness, instructing him to claim that I'd been confused and erratic in recent months. They wanted him to suggest that my financial decisions showed signs of mental decline. "They want me to lie, Grandma. They want me to help them steal your money by claiming you're losing your mind." The betrayal was breathtaking in its scope. They weren't just taking my money. They were trying to take my autonomy, my dignity, my very right to make my own decisions. "Brandon, would you be willing to testify about what you overheard?" "Absolutely. I'm done protecting them. What they're doing is evil." That weekend, Diane drove up to visit and provide moral support. We sat in my garden, drinking wine and planning my counterattack. "You know what I find most amazing about this whole situation?" Diane said, refilling our glasses. "What's that?" "They're spending money they don't have on lawyers to try to get money they're not entitled to. It's like watching someone dig their own grave with a gold shovel." She was right. The legal fees alone would cost them thousands, money they clearly didn't have since they'd been depending on my support. They were borrowing against their future to fund a lawsuit that would likely fail. "Diane, I have an idea, a terrible, wonderful idea." Monday morning, I called Sarah with my proposal. She listened carefully, then began laughing. "Mrs. Foster, that's absolutely diabolical and completely legal. I love it." The next phase of my plan required patience and perfect timing. While Christina's lawyer prepared their frivolous lawsuit, I began quietly gathering something much more powerful. Documentation of every financial interaction we'd had over the past 5 years. Bank transfers, credit card statements, loan agreements, even casual text messages about money. Patricia's team compiled everything into a comprehensive financial history that painted a clear picture of systematic exploitation. But the coup de grace came when Sarah's investigator discovered something Christina probably thought I'd never find out about. She'd been telling her friends and neighbors that I was becoming senile and that they were managing my finances for my own protection. She'd been laying the groundwork for this legal assault for months, possibly years. Sarah, how much can we sue them for? Well, there's the $314,000 in direct transfers. Then there's interest and penalties, emotional distress, legal fees. And if we can prove fraudulent intent, she calculated rapidly, we could be looking at over $600,000. $600,000. More than they'd ever be able to repay. And if they can't pay, then we start seizing assets. The house, the cars, the business equipment. Everything goes to satisfy the judgment. That afternoon, I did something that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. I authorized Sarah to file our countersuit immediately, asking for full damages and requesting an emergency hearing to freeze all of Robert and Christina's assets pending the outcome. Mrs. Foster, are you sure you want to go nuclear? Sarah asked. I thought about the group chat message, about Brandon's car being repossessed while they planned their legal assault, about years of thankless financial support followed by accusations of mental incompetence. Sarah, they fired the first shot. I'm just making sure it's the last shot of the war. The papers were served that evening while Robert and Christina were having dinner at their favorite restaurant. According to the process server, Christina actually gasped when she read the countersuit. They called me within an hour, both of them shouting through the speakerphone. Mom, this is insane. Robert's voice was pitched high with panic. You're trying to destroy us. No, Robert, I'm trying to protect myself from people who've been systematically exploiting me for years. We never exploited you, Christina screamed. We loved you. We included you in our family. You included my bank account in your family. There's a difference. The conversation devolved into threats and accusations, but I hung up, feeling oddly calm. For the first time in this entire mess, I was playing offense instead of defense. That night, Catherine called to check on me. Maggie, how are you feeling about escalating things legally? Honestly, I feel powerful. For years, I've been reacting to their demands, their crises, their emotional manipulation. Now I'm setting the terms. And if they apologize? If they try to make amends? I thought about that carefully. Catherine, I think we're past apologies. They tried to have me declared mentally incompetent to steal my money. That's not a mistake or a misunderstanding. That's a calculated assault on my dignity and freedom. So what's your endgame? My endgame is showing them that actions have consequences, that you can't treat people badly and expect them to keep enabling you forever. What about Brandon? Brandon was the one part of this situation that still caused me pain. But even that was getting clearer. Brandon's learning that sometimes doing the right thing means standing up to the people you love. It's a hard lesson, but an important one. The legal battle would take months to resolve, but I already felt like I'd won something more important than money. I'd won back my self-respect. The mediation conference was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a gray November morning. Sarah had prepared me thoroughly, but walking into that sterile conference room still felt like entering a battlefield. Robert and Christina sat on one side of the long table with their attorney, a nervous-looking man who kept shuffling papers. I took my seat across from them with Sarah beside me, noting how they avoided eye contact. Christina looked terrible. She'd lost weight, and her usually perfect hair was showing gray roots. Robert's suit was wrinkled, and he had the hollow-eyed look of someone who hadn't been sleeping. Good. Maybe they were finally understanding the gravity of their situation. The mediator, a calm woman in her 60s named Dr. Helen Blackwood, opened the session with the standard speech about confidentiality and good faith negotiations. We're here because both parties have filed serious claims against each other, she began. Mrs. Foster, you're claiming financial exploitation. Mr. and Mrs. Davis, you're claiming elder financial abuse. These are serious allegations that could result in significant financial and legal consequences for everyone involved. Christina's attorney cleared his throat. Dr. Blackwood, my clients are here today hoping to resolve this matter amicably. They love Mrs. Foster and want to rebuild their family relationship. Sarah leaned forward. Dr. Blackwood, my client has documentation showing that the Davis family has systematically exploited her financially for over 5 years, culminating in an attempt to have her declared mentally incompetent to maintain control of her assets. The mediator reviewed our financial records for several minutes, her expression growing increasingly grave. Mrs. Davis, she said finally, these documents show substantial financial transfers from Mrs. Foster to your family. Can you explain the nature of these payments? Christina's composure cracked immediately. She's our family. She wanted to help us. We never forced her to give us anything. But you did expect those payments to continue indefinitely, Sarah interjected, even to the point of filing a lawsuit when they stopped. We filed that lawsuit because her behavior became erratic, Robert burst out. She cut off all contact with the family over a simple misunderstanding. Dr. Blackwood consulted her notes. According to the documentation provided, Mrs. Foster was excluded from family gatherings via group text message. Is that accurate? The silence that followed was deafening. Their attorney whispered something urgent to Christina, who flushed red. That was taken out of context, Christina said weakly. The message read, and I quote, Sarah said, reading from her notes, "We've all agreed you're no longer part of the family. Don't come to any gatherings." How exactly is that taken out of context? Dr. Blackwood made several notes, then looked up with the expression of someone who'd seen enough family dysfunction to fill several psychology textbooks. Let's take a break, she announced. I'd like to speak with each party separately. During our private session, Dr. Blackwood was blunt. Mrs. Foster, based on the documentation you've provided, you have an extremely strong case for financial exploitation. The pattern of dependency, the manipulation, the attempt to claim mental incompetence, it's textbook elder abuse. What about their claim that I was being abusive by withdrawing support? She actually laughed. Mrs. Foster, you are under no legal obligation to financially support adult children or their families. Withdrawing voluntary assistance is not abuse. It's boundary setting. When the session resumed, Robert and Christina looked even more shaken. Their attorney had clearly explained their legal position, which was somewhere between weak and non-existent. Mrs. Foster, their attorney began carefully, my clients would like to apologize for any misunderstandings and propose a settlement. I'm listening, I said coolly. Christina leaned forward, tears starting to flow. Maggie, I'm sorry. We're sorry. We took you for granted and we handled the whole situation badly. We want to make things right. What did you have in mind? Robert pulled out a handwritten document. We've prepared a formal apology acknowledging our mistakes. We'll drop our lawsuit immediately, and we'll agree to a structured repayment plan for the money you've given us over the years. Sarah examined the document, her eyebrows rising. Mrs. Foster, they're proposing to repay $60,000 over 10 years. That's less than 20% of what you've actually provided, and it doesn't include interest or legal fees. I stared at my son, this man who'd once been a little boy who brought me wildflowers and told me he loved me every night at bedtime. Robert, do you have any idea how much money I've given your family over the past 5 years? He shifted uncomfortably. $314,000 plus interest. That's over $350,000 in today's dollars. The number hit the room like a bomb. Christina actually gasped. Their attorney looked like he wanted to disappear. You're offering to repay $60,000 of the $350,000 you've taken from me, and you think that's fair? Mom, we don't have that kind of money, Robert said desperately. We've been living paycheck to paycheck. Living paycheck to paycheck on my paycheck, I corrected. Robert, you've been charging resort trips and golf memberships to my credit cards while telling people I help out sometimes. That's not paycheck to paycheck living. That's fraud. Christina tried a different approach. Maggie, what about Brandon? He's your grandson. Do you really want to destroy his family over money? The manipulation was so blatant, it was almost impressive. appeal to my love for Brandon to guilt me into accepting their inadequate offer. Christina, let me be very clear about something. Brandon will always be welcome in my life, regardless of what happens between us. But he's also learning an important lesson about consequences and integrity, something you apparently never taught him. Dr. Blackwood intervened. Let's focus on realistic solutions. Mrs. Foster, what would you need to see to consider settling this matter? I looked across the table at Robert and Christina, these people who'd been so casual about taking my money and so vicious about attacking my competence when I stopped providing it. Full repayment of all documented transfers, plus legal fees and interest, a formal admission of financial exploitation, and a binding agreement that they will never again contact me asking for financial assistance. Their attorney went pale. Mrs. Foster, that's over $600,000. My clients don't have those resources. Then perhaps they should have thought about that before filing a frivolous lawsuit claiming I'm mentally incompetent. Christina dissolved into tears. Maggie, you're asking us to lose everything. Our house, our cars, Robert's business. You risked everything when you decided to bite the hand that fed you, I replied calmly. I'm simply allowing you to face the natural consequences of your choices. The mediation continued for another 2 hours, but the positions were clear. They wanted me to accept pennies on the dollar and pretend the whole thing had been a misunderstanding. I wanted full accountability and actual consequences. As we were packing up to leave, Robert made one last desperate plea. Mom, please, I know we messed up, but we're still family. Don't destroy us over this. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and felt a strange mixture of love and disappointment. Robert, you destroyed this relationship when you decided I wasn't family unless I was paying your bills. I'm just declining to keep funding my own mistreatment. Walking out of that conference room, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete control over my own life. No more guilt, no more manipulation. No more trying to buy love from people who saw me as an ATM. Sarah was practically glowing. Mrs. Foster, that was magnificent. They have no legal ground to stand on, and they know it. What happens next? They have 30 days to respond to our settlement demand. If they refuse, we go to trial and likely get everything we asked for, plus punitive damages. That evening, Brandon called. Grandma, I heard about the mediation. Are you okay? I'm better than okay, sweetheart. I'm finally free. What does that mean? It means I'm done letting other people define my worth based on what I can do for them. It means I'm going to spend the rest of my life being appreciated for who I am, not what I can provide. And us, our relationship? Brandon, you and I are fine. You apologized sincerely. You're taking responsibility for your choices, and you're building your own life. That's all I ever wanted from any of you. After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in my garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Tomorrow might bring more legal challenges, more family drama, more attempts at manipulation. But tonight, I was exactly where I wanted to be. Free, independent, and finally in control of my own story. And next few weeks brought unexpected developments. Sarah's investigator had been digging deeper into Christina's background, and what he found was disturbing. Mrs. Foster, Sarah said during our weekly update call, we've uncovered some troubling information. Christina has a history of targeting elderly family members for financial exploitation. What do you mean? Her first marriage, before Robert, she convinced her elderly father-in-law to sign over power of attorney in 2011. He died 6 months later, and Christina inherited everything. The family contested the will, but by then the money was gone. I felt sick. Are you saying Christina has done this before? Not just Christina, Robert too. We found bankruptcy records from his first business venture. He'd been taking deposits from elderly clients for landscaping work, then declaring bankruptcy to avoid completing the jobs. There were at least 8 complaints filed. The room started spinning. This wasn't a family that had gradually fallen into bad financial habits. This was a systematic pattern of elder abuse going back over a decade. How many victims? Sarah's face was grim. At least 15 that we can document. Probably more. Maggie, they've been targeting elderly people their entire adult lives. I reached for my phone to call Patricia, but Sarah stopped me. There's more. Something that's going to hurt. She pulled out a final document, this one newer than the others. Last week, Christina filed for divorce from Robert. But here's the thing. She's claiming that the elder abuse was all his idea, that she was just following his lead. She's trying to cut a deal with the district attorney to testify against him in exchange for reduced charges. The betrayal was stunning. After everything they'd done together, Christina was now throwing Robert under the bus to save herself. Where is Robert now? He's moved back in with his brother James, temporarily. He's been calling my office, wanting to meet and explain everything. I think he's finally ready to tell the whole truth. I agreed to meet Robert that evening at a neutral location, a quiet diner on the edge of town where we could talk privately. He was waiting when I arrived, looking haggard and defeated. Mom, thank you for coming. I know you don't owe me anything. I slid into the booth across from him, noting how much weight he'd lost, how gray his hair had become. Sarah told me about Christina's plea bargain and about the other victims. Robert's shoulders sagged. So you know. I know some of it. I want to hear the rest from you. For the next 2 hours, Robert told me a story that was even worse than I'd imagined. Christina had been running elder abuse scams since her early 20s, targeting wealthy elderly people through dating sites, church groups, and community organizations. She'd refined her techniques over years, becoming expert at identifying vulnerable targets and gaining their trust. She taught me everything, Robert said, his voice hollow. How to spot elderly people who were isolated, how to gradually gain control of their finances, how to make them dependent on us emotionally so they'd keep giving. Robert, you're talking about predatory behavior. You were deliberately targeting vulnerable people. I know that now, but at the time, Christina made it seem like we were just accepting generosity from people who wanted to help family. She had a way of justifying everything. What about me? Was I just another target? Robert looked up, and I saw tears in his eyes. You were different. You're my mother. I love you. But Christina convinced me that you wanted to help. That taking your money was just letting you feel useful and needed. For 5 years, Robert, you let me pay your bills for 5 years while treating me like hired help. I know, and I hate myself for it. Mom, I want to make this right. How? Robert pulled out his own folder of documents. I've been working with a private investigator, documenting all of Christina's previous victims. I want to help them get their money back. I want to testify against her in court. I want to make sure she never does this to another family. The conversation continued until almost midnight. Robert told me about elderly victims who'd lost life savings, about families torn apart by Christina's manipulations, about a pattern of abuse that spanned multiple states and countless victims. Why are you telling me all this now? I asked finally. Because Brandon made me realize something. He said you didn't fight back just for the money. You fought back to protect other people from going through what you went through. And he's right. If I don't help stop Christina, she'll just find new victims. A week later, I sat in a district attorney's office with Sarah, Brandon, and Robert as prosecutors outlined their expanded case against Christina. With Robert's cooperation, they'd identified 19 additional victims and recovered evidence of a sophisticated elder abuse operation. Mrs. Foster, the lead prosecutor said, your decision to fight back has potentially saved dozens of future victims. Christina Wright, that's her real name, by the way, has been running these scams across multiple states for over 15 years. Wright wasn't even her real last name. She'd been using false identities, fake references, and forged documents to gain credibility with her targets. What kind of sentence is she looking at? With the additional charges and the pattern of predatory behavior, we're looking at 45 to 65 years. She'll likely die in prison. Robert flinched at the number, but didn't object. He'd made his choice to cooperate fully, understanding that justice sometimes required painful sacrifices. A support group meeting that Thursday was larger than usual. Word had spread about the criminal investigation, and several people had driven from neighboring counties to attend. I stood to address the group. I want to share something with all of you. When I first cut off financial support to my family, I thought I was just setting boundaries. But what I've learned is that my situation wasn't unique. There are predators out there who specifically target elderly people, and they're often our own family members. A frail woman in her 80s raised her hand. My name is Dorothy, and 6 months ago my son convinced me to sign over power of attorney because I was getting confused. Last week I discovered he'd sold my house and moved me into assisted living without my consent. I don't know what to do. The room went silent. Dorothy's situation was exactly what Robert and Christina had been trying to create for me. Dorothy, I said gently, have you spoken to an attorney? I can't afford one. And my son says no one will believe me because I'm old and forgetful. Sarah had been attending the meeting as my guest. She stepped forward. Dorothy, I'm a family law attorney, and what you're describing is criminal fraud. I'd be happy to represent you pro bono. By the end of the evening, Sarah had taken on 4 more cases, and we'd formed a network of support that felt revolutionary. These weren't just support group members. They were warriors reclaiming their dignity. Meanwhile, my own legal case was approaching its climax. Robert and Christina's attorney had requested another mediation session, claiming his clients were now willing to accept full accountability. But the criminal investigation had uncovered something else. Christina had been running similar schemes on other elderly family members. Her grandmother on her father's side, Robert's great-aunt. They'd been systematically exploiting elderly relatives for years. Mrs. Foster, Sarah said during our preparation meeting, the district attorney's office has decided to pursue criminal charges against both Christina and Robert. Financial exploitation of elderly persons, fraud, conspiracy. It's convicted on all counts. Christina could face 50 to 70 years, and Robert 15 to 20 with his cooperation agreement. The numbers felt surreal. My son could spend significant time in prison for what started as unpaid mortgage assistance. But the more I learned about their other victims, the less sympathy I felt. Christina's grandmother had lost her life savings. Robert's great-aunt had been forced to sell her home. They'd been running a family financial abuse operation for at least a decade. That evening, I did something I'd been considering for weeks. I called a reporter at the local newspaper who'd been following the case. Mrs. Foster, would you be willing to share your story? We're doing a piece on elder financial abuse in our community. The idea terrified and thrilled me simultaneously. Going public would mean exposing my family's behavior to the entire community, but it would also mean helping other elderly people recognize and resist similar exploitation. Yes, I said, I'll do the interview, but I want to make sure the focus is on prevention and education, not just sensationalizing my family's dysfunction. Absolutely, Mrs. Foster. This is about helping other families avoid similar situations. As I prepared for the interview, I realized something important. I wasn't ashamed anymore. For months, I'd felt embarrassed about being taken advantage of, guilty about cutting off support, conflicted about the legal consequences. But now I felt something else entirely, proud of finally standing up for myself, proud of refusing to be anyone's ATM, proud of showing other elderly people that they didn't have to tolerate financial abuse from their families. The newspaper article hit the stands on a Tuesday morning, and by noon, my phone was ringing nonstop. The reporter had done an excellent job focusing on the warning signs of elder financial abuse while protecting specific details. The response was overwhelming. By the end of the week, I'd received over 50 calls from elderly people dealing with financial manipulation from their families. The article had touched a nerve in the community. Catherine suggested expanding the support group. Maggie, you've obviously struck a chord. These people need guidance, and you have experience they can learn from. I don't know anything about running large support groups. You know about setting boundaries, recognizing manipulation, and standing up for yourself. That's exactly what they need to hear." Diane encouraged it enthusiastically. You could call it something like Seniors Supporting Seniors or the Dignity Project. Meet weekly, share experiences, give each other courage. Would you help me run it? Are you kidding? I've been dealing with my own family manipulation for years. This sounds perfect. We scheduled the first expanded meeting for the following Thursday evening at the community center. I expected maybe 20 people. 34 showed up. The stories they shared were heartbreaking and familiar. Adult children who'd gradually taken control of bank accounts, grandchildren who only called when they needed money, families who'd isolated elderly relatives from friends and outside support. But the most powerful moment came when Dorothy stood up to speak. I wanted everyone to know that thanks to Sarah and this group, I got my house back. My son has been arrested, and I'm living independently again. The applause was thunderous. Dorothy had become a symbol of what was possible when elderly people refused to be victims. But more importantly, she continued, I've learned that age doesn't make us powerless. It makes us experienced, and experienced is the best weapon we have against people who try to take advantage of us. After the meeting, Brandon pulled me aside. Grandma, I've been thinking about something. This support group, the legal work you're doing, the advocacy, it's become bigger than just our family situation. What do you mean? I mean you've started a movement. People are calling you the Dignity Grandmother online. There are support groups starting in other cities, modeling themselves after yours. You've become a symbol. A symbol. The idea was both flattering and terrifying. Brandon, I just wanted people to stop taking advantage of me. And in the process, you've shown thousands of other elderly people that they don't have to tolerate abuse either. That's bigger than just our family, Grandma. That's changing the world. The courtroom was packed on the morning of Christina's sentencing. I sat in the front row with Brandon, Sarah, and 7 other elderly victims who'd traveled from across the state to see justice served. After 20 months of legal proceedings, this was finally the end. Christina looked smaller than I remembered, dressed in an orange jumpsuit with her hair pulled back severely. The woman who'd once commanded my kitchen and controlled my family's finances now sat shackled at the defendant's table, awaiting her fate. Judge Margaret Steinberg was known for her tough stance on elder abuse cases. She'd reviewed all the evidence, heard from 19 victims, and listened to Robert's testimony about the scope of Christina's operations. Ms. Wright, the judge began, using Christina's real name, you have been convicted of multiple counts of elder financial abuse, fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. The evidence shows a pattern of predatory behavior spanning over 15 years and affecting dozens of elderly victims across multiple states. I watched Christina's face remain expressionless as the judge continued. The court has received victim impact statements from 26 elderly people whose lives you've destroyed. You've stolen life savings, destroyed family relationships, and left vulnerable people homeless and destitute. The judge paused, consulting her notes. However, the court has also received several letters on your behalf, including one from Mrs. Margaret Foster, whose family you targeted most recently. I'd agonized over that letter for weeks. Sarah had advised against it. Brandon had questioned my motives, but Catherine had helped me understand why I needed to write it. Your Honor, I'd written, I do not ask for leniency for Christina Wright. She is a predator who targeted vulnerable elderly people with calculated cruelty. However, I want the court to know that her victims are not just broken elderly people. We are strong, resilient individuals who have survived and thrived despite her abuse. We have found our voices, reclaimed our dignity, and built a community of support that will outlast any prison sentence you impose. Christina Wright stole our money, but she could not steal our spirit. Judge Steinberg continued reading from my letter. Mrs. Foster writes that while she supports the maximum sentence, she wants the court to understand that the victims in this case have become advocates and leaders, helping other elderly people recognize and resist financial abuse. The judge set down the letter and looked directly at Christina. Ms. Wright, based on the severity of your crimes, the pattern of predatory behavior, and the extensive harm you've caused to vulnerable victims, this court sentences you to 58 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. 58 years. Christina would die in prison. There was no visible reaction from Christina, but I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction, but resolution. The woman who tried to steal my dignity and destroy my family's future would never hurt another elderly person. After the hearing, the victims gathered outside the courthouse for what had become an impromptu support meeting. Dorothy was there, along with several others from our Thursday group. "What happens now?" asked Eleanor Murphy, a woman whose daughter-in-law had stolen her jewelry collection. "Now we keep fighting," I said. "This was never just about Christina or my family. This was about showing elderly people everywhere that they don't have to tolerate abuse." Brandon approached with the newspaper reporter who'd been covering the case. "Mrs. Foster, how do you feel about the sentence?" "I feel like justice has been served, but more importantly, I feel proud of what all the victims accomplished by speaking up. We showed that elderly people are not helpless targets. We're experienced, intelligent individuals who refuse to be silenced." That afternoon, I received a call that surprised me. Robert was being released from county jail after serving 11 months and completing his community service requirements. His cooperation had earned him a suspended sentence and 5 years of probation. "Mom," he said when I answered the phone, "I know I don't have the right to ask, but would you consider meeting with me? I want to apologize properly, and I have something to propose." We met at the same diner where he'd confessed Christina's full history of abuse. He looked better than he had in months, healthier, more focused, less defeated. "Mom, I know I can never fully make up for what I did to you and the others, but I want to try." "What did you have in mind?" Robert pulled out a business plan, professionally prepared and detailed. "I want to start a nonprofit organization focused on elder abuse prevention. I want to use my experience as Christina's partner to help law enforcement identify and prosecute financial predators." I reviewed the documents carefully. The plan was comprehensive, well-researched, and potentially very effective. "Robert, this is impressive work, but why should I trust you?" "Because I understand these schemes from the inside. I know how predators think, how they choose targets, how they gain trust. I can teach elderly people to recognize the warning signs before they become victims." "And you'd work with our support group?" "If you'll have me, Mom. I know I'll never be your son the way I was before all this happened. But maybe I can be something better. Maybe I can be part of the solution instead of part of the problem." It took me several weeks to decide. I consulted with Brandon, with Catherine, with Sarah, and with the other support group members. The consensus was cautious but supportive. "If he's serious about prevention work," Dorothy said, "then his insider knowledge could help a lot of people." 6 months later, Robert's nonprofit, the Dignity Defense Foundation, had helped identify 4 new elder abuse operations and assisted law enforcement in recovering over $480,000 for elderly victims. Our Thursday support group had grown into a network of 21 chapters across 4 states. Brandon had graduated law school and opened a practice specializing in elder law. The newspaper had written a follow-up article calling our movement a model for elder advocacy nationwide. But the moment that meant the most to me came on a quiet Tuesday evening. Brandon called with news that his law firm had just taken on a major case. A class action lawsuit against a scam operation targeting elderly people through fake charity calls. "Grandma, we're going to shut down an entire call center that's been stealing from seniors. And it all started because you taught me that elderly people deserve dignity and respect. After we hung up, I sat in my garden, watching the sunset and thinking about the strange journey my life had taken. 2 years ago, I'd been a lonely widow, writing checks to buy family affection. Now I was leading a movement that was helping elderly people across the country find their voices. My phone buzzed with a text from Diane. "Wine tonight? I have news about my sailboat adventure." I smiled and texted back, "Absolutely. I have news too." As I got ready for our evening together, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same person who'd stood in her kitchen 20 months ago, humiliated and excluded from her family's life. This woman stood straighter, smiled more confidently, lived more fully. This woman had learned that dignity wasn't something other people could give or take away. It was something you claimed for yourself, defended fiercely, and shared generously with others who needed to find their own. And this woman was just getting started. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new victims to help, new battles to fight. But tonight, I was exactly where I belonged, free, independent, and surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. The family that had tried to exclude me had taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to walk away from people who don't appreciate you. And sometimes that courage changes not just your life, but the lives of everyone around you. I turned off the lights and headed out to meet Diane, ready for whatever adventures lay ahead, because I'd finally learned the secret that had taken me 72 years to discover. The best chapters of your life can begin at any age, as long as you have the courage to write them yourself. 3 years later, the community center auditorium was filled to capacity. Over 200 people had gathered for the third annual Dignity Defense Conference, an event that had become a cornerstone of the elder advocacy movement. I stood backstage adjusting my microphone as Brandon gave me an encouraging thumbs up from the front row. Beside him sat Robert, who'd become one of the nation's leading experts on elder financial abuse prevention. Next to them was Dorothy, now serving as the regional coordinator for our support group network. "Ladies and gentlemen," the moderator announced, "please welcome our keynote speaker, Margaret Foster, founder of the Dignity Defense Movement and advocate for elderly rights nationwide." The applause was thunderous as I walked onto the stage. I looked out at the audience, elderly people who'd found their voices, family members who'd learned to respect boundaries, law enforcement officers trained in recognizing elder abuse, and young people like Brandon who dedicated their careers to protecting vulnerable populations. 3 years ago, I received a text message that changed my life. My son told me I was no longer part of the family. And in that moment of rejection, I discovered something more valuable than acceptance: self-respect. I told them my story, not with bitterness or anger, but with the wisdom that comes from hard-won battles. I talked about the importance of boundaries, the power of saying no, and the courage it takes to value yourself when others don't. "The greatest lie our culture tells us," I said, "is that family loyalty means tolerating abuse. But real love requires respect. Real relationships require reciprocity. And real family, the kind worth having, values you for who you are, not what you can provide." After the speech, dozens of people lined up to share their own stories. A woman in her 70s who'd recently cut off a financially abusive daughter. A man in his 80s who'd taken back control of his finances from manipulative grandchildren. A middle-aged woman who'd learned to set boundaries with her aging parents who expected unlimited financial support. Each story was different, but the theme was the same: dignity reclaimed, boundaries established, lives transformed. That evening, I sat on my back porch with Brandon, Diane, Robert, Catherine, Sarah, and several members of our original support group. We were celebrating the conference's success and planning next year's expansion. "Grandma," Brandon said, raising his glass, "I want to propose a toast to the woman who taught us all that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. To the grandmother who became a movement. To Maggie Foster, the dignity grandmother. Everyone raised their glasses, and I felt tears prick my eyes. Not tears of sadness or regret, but tears of gratitude for the unexpected journey my life had taken. "I have an announcement," I said when the toast was finished. "I've been working with a publisher, and my memoir will be released next spring. It's called The Cost of Family: One Woman's Journey from ATM to Advocate." The group erupted in excited congratulations. Robert looked emotional. "Mom, can I say something?" "Of course. I know I can never undo the damage I caused. But watching you transform pain into purpose, watching you help thousands of people find their dignity, it's taught me what real strength looks like. I'm proud to be your son, even though I didn't deserve you as a mother." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "We all deserve second chances, Robert. The question is what we do with them." As the evening wound down and my friends began to leave, I stood alone in my garden, looking up at the stars. My phone buzzed with a message from the publisher. "Early reviews are incredible. This book is going to help so many people." I thought about the woman I'd been 3 years ago, invisible, taken for granted, valued only for her checkbook. And I thought about the woman I'd become, strong, independent, making a difference in the world. The family that had excluded me had inadvertently given me the greatest gift, the opportunity to discover my own worth. And in discovering it, I'd helped thousands of others discover theirs. Tomorrow I'd wake up and continue the work. More support groups to organize, more victims to help, more lives to impact. But tonight, I was simply grateful for the journey, for the lessons, for the unexpected blessing of being forced to choose myself. Because sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you're meant to have. And sometimes the greatest act of love is learning to love yourself enough to walk away from those who don't. I went inside, turned out the lights, and climbed into bed. As I drifted off to sleep, I smiled, thinking about all the elderly people out there who were just beginning to find their voices, just starting to reclaim their dignity, just discovering that it's never too late to rewrite your story. And I hoped that somewhere, somehow, my story would help them write theirs. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.